We have a terrific crowd here today, so I'm so glad we made the perfect decision to be outside at our beautiful Girl Scout Rock. And we have all the elected officials have conspired to prevent it from raining during this ceremony. I am Nancy Seligson. I'm the supervisor of the town of MAMARONECK, and I welcome all of you to the 2018 September 11th memorial service for the town of MAMARONECK, village of MAMARONECK, and village of Larchmont. It's hard to believe that this year we mark 17th anniversary of September 11th, 2001. I remember too well hearing the news of the plane attacks while I was in a county planning board meeting. We abandoned the meeting and all left in shock. I drove directly to the town and asked what I could do to help, and asked about the safety of our emergency responders. They were on the ready to do whatever was necessary, but thankfully they were not in harm's way, as most of them were manning evacuated fire stations in the Bronx. One of the most difficult things that day was to tell my two small children, when I picked them up from Chatsworth Avenue School, what had happened, but they could not comprehend it. We walked over to Manor Park and we saw the smoke billowing out of Lower Manhattan. September 11th, 2001 was a day that jolted us into shock and horror, but it also pushed us to appreciate our families, our community, and our country. We came together as a people, as Americans, in solidarity and in sorrow, to remember those that were lost, but to look for comfort among our neighbors. The whole world and nation sympathized with New York then and created a bond of common humanity. Today, the world and the nation feel more divided and polarized. Instant communication can sting and bite. People choose sides before listening or reflection. I especially appreciate that our community can come together in a spirit of harmony to support one another, and not just on this day of reflection, but on the many occasions that we get together to share our values, respect our differences, and sustain and improve our community. Thank you all for being here today. Now we're going to hear from some other members of our community, but first I'd like to thank and introduce the town board members that are here with us this afternoon. We have Deputy Supervisor Jane Elkandini, we have Sabrina Fiddleman, Councilwoman, and Jeff King, Councilman. Abby Katz is on her way, but she is probably in traffic, I hate to say. So thank you guys for being here with us today also. We have the American Legion's Posts 90 and 347 presenting themselves as color guard today. As their commander, Al Bender, said to me, they're here just to look pretty. He also wanted me to point out that Sergeant Pearl, USMC, is lying down on the ground there with a red collar on because he is a dog. He has served 4 tours in Iraq and is now part of the Legion, which is terrific. And I feel safer having Sergeant Pearl here. The Boy Scouts of America, Troop 4, are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Reverend Carol GADSDEN up from St. Thomas's Church to give us the invocation.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving Creator, we know and call you by different names: Yahweh, God, Allah, higher power. But what we hold in common is we've been created in your image. Today we remember the terrible moments when those who made claims in your name, who acted to seek power rather than to submit to yours, and in doing so unleashed death, devastation, and fear through an unconscionable and unspeakable act of violence that destroyed families and shattered hopes and dreams. As we gather here to remember the 12 members of the community, along with the nearly 3,000 who died that day, we call on you, Creator of us all, not only to remind us, but to remind us, to use the power you have given us to create, not to destroy, to love, not to hate, to build instead of tearing down, to unite rather than divide, to speak in truth and care instead of deceit and disregard, to seek restorative justice instead of revenge. Guide us in our hearts and minds to your will and desires for us to be people of peace. Cause us to reach out to the stranger, those different from us, to see you in each one. Help us to turn from responding with suspicion and instead with welcome. Bind up in love the hearts that still mourn, are frightened, whose joy has been stolen from them. But most importantly on this day, may we be reminded as our task as God's people to build a world that looks more like God's kingdom of shalom, salam, and peace. In your loving name we do pray this. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend GADSDEN. And you might recall that in previous years we had Reverend Bill Crawford here, but he recently retired. So I was so happy and appreciate to have Reverend GADSDEN here today. We welcome you. Okay, now we are going to ask some other elected officials to speak. I don't think the county executive is here yet. Oh, I just got word that he called and he's on his way. But we are very fortunate to have several other elected officials. And the first one I'd like to call upon is our state senator, Shelley Mayer.
Thank you. It's a privilege and an honor to be here this year for the first time for me representing this community. It's a somber day. It's a day of great sadness to me personally and to all of us who witnessed that unspeakable day. And I want to commend us for making sure every year that we stand together as Americans and remember the individuals, each of them, their families, their loved ones, their lives that were lost. Each of them were part of our community. And it is our job as Americans to put aside our differences, to put aside our challenges, and to remember that we are greater than what divides us when we honor the memory of those who so terribly had their lives taken. I also want to acknowledge those who have died since 9/11 from diseases related to what happened on that day. Each of them, so many in the New York Police Department and the Fire Department of New York, and our building trades brothers and sisters who served at the pile after 9/11. Each of them requires us to join together as Americans, remember them, acknowledge their service, and make sure that every year this day is in our memory as a solemn time to stand together as Americans and honor the terrible thing that happened, and just make up our mind that their lives shall not be in vain. Thank you again for the opportunity to come.
Thank you, Shelley. County Executive George Latimer has just joined us, and I'd like to call upon him to speak now. Thanks.
I'd love to say it's a pleasure to be here, but it's a sad day, and you wish that we wouldn't have to have this ceremony. but I've had the opportunity to be at every single one of these in the 17 years since that day. And it's a big county, but Larchmont and MAMARONECK is two of the communities that I've gotten to know better than any other, except for Rye, is a place that remembers these people. And the people whose names we read off are real human beings that we remember. I remember Helen Crossan and what she looked like, and John McErlane. I remember these people, having talked to them, even if only for a few minutes. And so this is not just a generic thing. This is a human thing that affects you as an individual. I think perhaps what most matters to me on this day, 17 years later, is that we're in a moment, and I think it's only a moment, of terrible disunity in this country, where we have somehow started to find the things that make us different from each other as the central reason of how we interact with each other. That because we disagree on politics, or because we have a different faith, or we have a different ethnic heritage, that somehow we're not still all Americans, and that we can say things to each other and about each other that are mean-spirited. And I think we remember what happened on this day as 9/11 happened to all of the people that it happened to because they were Americans. They were not just white Americans, or black Americans, or Latino or Asian Americans. They were not just men or women or adults, children. They weren't people with this amount of dollars or that amount of dollars. Those planes went into those buildings to kill Americans, regardless of their demographics. And we have to remember that that's what links us, this country. The attack on those human beings was an attack on our freedom. The freedoms that we believe in practicing religion individually as we each see fit. That we can be neighbors in a community and still have different religious beliefs. That we can be neighbors in the community and still have different ideas about how things should operate. And that we have a chance in our own personal lives with our freedom and with our voice and who we elect and how we proceed forward, that we can do all of those things, and we can do them individually, and yet we can do them as a society with freedom. That is a very scary thought to those people in the world, wherever they may be, who believe that one person should make the decision, that believes that the individual doesn't matter, but that's what we believe. And these people whom we mourn today, and we're going to mourn them forever until we leave, until it's our time to go, will always be here. And we'll be here to remember them because they were everyday people who were doing their job that day and had their lives taken away from them. And the first responders were everyday people sworn to do a job just like so many of the men and women in uniform here today, and they went into those buildings to do their job. Everyday people facing an incredible horror, something we'd never want to face ourselves. So we remember them, and we remember what unifies us. What unifies us is not the color of our skin, the amount of dollars in our wallets, but that we are all Americans who believe in each other's freedom, that we respect each other, and we love each other. And we can be gentler to each other on Facebook. And we can be gentler to each other on Twitter. Because we have so much more together that links us than separates us.
Thank you, George, and we do so appreciate your devotion to our community. It's reciprocal. Steve Otis, our assemblyman, called me this morning to tell me that he wouldn't be able to be here today because the annual event that he attends with families who have lost members of their families at 9/11 was having their event at the exact same time as ours today. So he was very sorry to miss it, and I promised I would relay that. I don't know if Catherine Parker is here yet. I know she's on her way, so we will wait for her. But now I'd like to call upon the mayor of the village of Larchmont, Lorraine Walsh, our sisterhood in community.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always difficult when you have to get up after George Latimer at the podium. But, you know, this ceremony and thinking for days about what it is that you want to say and what is the message that speaks to you this year coming out of that shared experience 17 years ago. I was thinking a lot about the aftermath right after, and how people from, as was mentioned, all walks of life came together and helped each other, not just in New York, but really all over the country, and gave blood and gave money. And then people all over the world came together. And the phrase, they attacked us for because they hate our freedom. Our freedoms are the things that George enumerated and that Shelley spoke of. Freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. These are the important freedoms. And in the years following right after 9/11, those concepts of freedom started to spread out around the world. We remember seeing the Afghans with their blue fingers because they had voted for the first time in a long time. The Arab Spring, the idea that our freedoms, the values that we hold dear, were going to finally blossom around the world, and we would truly succeed and be victorious over this event and the hatred that brought it. But as has been mentioned, these last few years, and this year most especially, it feels sometimes as if the world is spinning out of control. And, excuse me. And that our own country, we're sometimes on the verge of tearing each other apart. So, in a sense, I'm starting to feel a little sad that we've given in. And we've lost sight of the importance of the values that we all hold dear. I thought today I kind of needed a little inspirational poem, and I'm hoping that it helps me a little bit, and hopefully it'll help you guys out here as well. I sat and stared at the destruction on the screen, the waste of life, the loss of families and dreams. I couldn't move. I couldn't run and hide the truth. I sat and stared. I sat and stared and thought of you. I thought of you and me and everyone on this great planet. I know we all could be the other one the moment of our birth. Instead, we go on hating, killing, when instead we need to care. And if we did, I wouldn't have to sit and stare. I felt the pain in all the faces that I saw, time and again, full of emptiness and shock. My heart went out in hopes that some way I could share the peace I had before I had to sit and stare. This world is small, this little world is all we know, and why we fight is something I will never know. There's love for all, and all we have to do is share. And if we did, I wouldn't have to sit and stare. And that's a poem by Kevin Rowley, written on September 11, 2001. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Catherine Parker has joined us, our county legislator, so I'd like to call upon her now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Supervisor Seligson. And thank you, Mayor Walsh, for asking the question, have we given up? Because I don't think we have. I think that, in fact, so much, yes, did change after 9/11/2001. I never look at a perfect blue, crisp fall day the same way ever again. And actually, I always felt that the weather that day should have looked like this. Should have been gray and dreary. It shouldn't have been as gorgeous, knowing what was to come. I also feel that when we're outside and we hear an airplane go over, as I did at the last service, I never, ever listen to a jet go over the same way. That is true. It really sends that shudder up and down my spine again, imagining. And for those of you that are here, that lost friends, you lost family, you lost neighbors, you lost that sense of community, I think that all of us, we have experienced that collective loss that we still grieve each and every year with the same power as it did 17 years ago. It's never, ever lessened. We'll never have another 9/11 that we think of in any terms other than what we have today. But I do think at the end of the day, what we have is each other. We need the reminder, as Mayor Walsh said, to know that we are together, regardless of whether we are man, woman, black, white, Republican, Democrat, whatever. We are here together, and if we remember that, remember our community, remember the lives lost, and sadly, if we remember the lives that continue to add to our total of the 9/11 lives lost, because we are losing people each year now that are suffering, the ones that ran into the building, the ones that were down in the World Trade Center area. If we continue to remember that, we will get through this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Now I'd like to call upon the mayor of our other sister municipality, Tom Murphy from the Village of Mamaroneck.
Thank you, Miss. Just this a little bit. You know, I've attended these for the past 17 years as an elected official, but I never had to speak before. I obviously echo everything that the previous elected officials have said. For me, it was I grew up in Manhattan. You know, Manhattan's my hometown. I lived there for the first 30 years of my life. When I was a kid, you could watch the towers go up. I had relatives who worked there during construction. I had relatives who worked there in 9/11. I had worked across the street at the World Financial Center for years and years. So, you know, while it was an attack on America, for me it was always an attack on my hometown. Because no matter where you're from, that's where you're from. And it's always where you're from. But, you know, in that time right after of unfathomable sadness, what I began seeing in Manhattan, because I work in Manhattan, I'm in Manhattan every day, is it's amazing, after they opened the bridges and tunnels, this amazing immigration into Manhattan of people from all over the country. People from the Midwest, people from down south, who just filled their car up with bottled water, who threw shovels and picks in the back of their car. They weren't getting paid. They just knew that there was an attack on us, and we were all one country, and they were going to help us. And they came here, and you could hear the accents, you could hear the southern drawls, you could hear the Midwestern accents, you could hear the upper Northwest accents. And right then I knew that we were going to be all right. I knew that this act of hate, this act of violence, that the only remedy to that was love and kindness. And these small acts of kindness from ordinary people, that's what made me know that we were going to be all right. Just like the men and women, our first responders, who are just normal people, but that day they did abnormal things. They did their duty to such an extent that they had to know the peril they were putting themselves in, but they went in anyway. And I think about the hundreds of stories from that day where there wasn't panic in those buildings. People were helping each other down the stairs. People were carrying people who couldn't walk. At that time, as it was said before, we weren't different. We were all Americans. We were all in the same boat. And we had that for a while. And of course, you know, things have gotten sour, and that's been noted here. You know, I was thinking about this today, that when I was a kid, and I'm sure a lot of you who are older remember it, but you guys might not have heard it. There used to be something that we used to say to each other. And when we were having a heated discussion, we would say, I might not agree with what you say, but I'll defend with my life your right to say it. And when you said that to another American, it was a sign of what we are. That's who we are. That no matter how much we disagree with each other, you got a right to say it. And I'm going to listen. Even if I don't agree with it, even if we have differences, because that fundamental right of expression makes us who we are. And, so we can't, look to shut each other down. We can't look to, persecute each other because we disagree with each other. We have to get that feeling back again, that we're all in this together. Whether we're right, left, center, way left, way right, we're all in this together. I'm sure we all have family members that we disagree with. But come Thanksgiving, we put up with it because there's love there. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, those little acts of love and kindness. Because at a time where I thought that, I just had my last child, he was a month old, and it was a hard time to have a baby. And, like, what am I bringing this child into? When I saw those acts of love and kindness, I knew we were all going to be all right eventually. And we're here, and we're still moving forward, and we obviously have our difficulties and our disagreements. But if we remember who we are, that we're all Americans, and we're all in this together, we're going to get through this too. Thank you all very much.
Okay, so you can see that we have the best elected officials in the whole world right here. We have to thank these folks because everyone here has obligations all over the place, and they have made it their purpose to be here today with us, and I really appreciate that. I also want to point out that Councilwoman Abby Katz has joined us. We have trustees from the village of Larchmont. We have Carol Casaza Herman, Malcolm Froman, Bubba Finelli. Bubba, is it okay to say Bubba? Also Peter Finelli, but Bubba. Oh, yes, and Sarah Bauer. Sorry, Sarah. Yes, and from the village of MAMARONECK, we have trustee Nora Lucas joining us. So we're very lucky to have everyone here. U.S. Representative Elliot Engel could not be here today, but he has a representative here, Bryant Daniels, and we appreciate your presence here today, and Representative Engel's work for us in Washington. So thank you. I know he has a vote today, so he's not able to be here. Now we are going to have the reading of the names, and we have Zach Bro and Liam Cox from the Boy Scouts Troop 4 who are going to read the names for us. After they read the names of those who lost their lives on September 11, 2001, STEPH CHINN is going to play taps for us, and STEPH is a music teacher from MAMARONECK Avenue School.
Helen Belisky.
J. Howard Bolton Jr.
Douglas G. Karpiloff.
Maurice P. Kelly.
Helen Crossan Kittle.
Patricia Helen Kittle.
Frank J. Kespino.
Edward H. Luckett.
John T. McErlane Jr.
Christopher T. Orgolevitz.
John A. Rea.
John F. Swain.
Let's continue with a moment of silence, please. We're now going to have the placing of the wreaths. I'm going to call up each municipality, and a representative from the emergency responders from each of the municipalities will place the wreaths. So we have members of the police departments, fire departments, and ambulance corps from each municipality that will bring up the wreaths. I'd like to call upon the town of MAMARONECK first. The village of MAMARONECK, the village of Larchmont, representatives of the veterans of American Legion Post 347, Post 90, and VFW David Potts Jr., Post 1156. Yes. Girl Scouts of Larchmont MAMARONECK. Thank you. Now the Girl Scouts are going to lead us in the song God Bless America, but I'm going to ask them to come over here, please, so that we can get you on the mic as well. So would you guys move over? Yeah.
Through the night with the light.
Thank you to the Girl Scouts, and thank you to, I want everyone to remember that the Girl Scouts are the one who created this special spot for us. It was their inspiration and idea to create Girl Scout Rock. And it really has become a special place in the town of Mamaroneck and for all of us. I would like to now invite Rabbi Jeff SIRKMAN up to give us a benediction. He is from Larchmont Temple.
He's had a busy day.
What is God's name? Depends on who you ask. We call God Elohim, Adonai, the God on high, or Jehovah, Lord of hosts, King of kings. When we need a God close by, Father, merciful one, my shepherd, or a God beyond all being, Allah, Krishna, eternal one, Emmanuel, almighty, Ram, or a presence between us all, Shakti, Hari Hari, Shekhinah, Holy One of Being. 17 years, and we still think ours is the only name. Terror erects walls of hate. Our loving remembrance builds a bridge of hope. Creator of every living soul, help us to understand that every human being, despite our differences of approach, is stamped with holiness inside. Maker of peace, move us to reach beyond ourselves, to perceive life's multiple paths, to know we need one another to find all the pieces to make our world whole once more. And for those of us who don't call God at all, realize that as you reach out to sisters and brothers alongside, joining forces to fix the brokenness, hand in hand, hearts united in hope, you are making God's name real. So for all of us, may it be. Amen.
Thank you to everyone who joined us today and is participating, for making the effort to be here. I also have to give special thanks to the Town of Mamaroneck Highway Department, who has made this park such a lovely spot. I think it really shines today. I also want to especially thank Sue Odierna, who has worked so hard to put this event together and is so organized. I can't believe we had one minor change. Thank you, Sue. So let's take great joy and comfort and support in being here together. After all these great speeches and talks, I feel like I want to reach out and either shake everyone's hand or give them a kiss. So if anyone needs one from me, just let me know. But thank you very much to everyone for your participation, especially the fire departments, police departments, ambulance corps, and veterans, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Thank you.